When it comes to drones, there's nothing better than a good handful of nuts. Hey everybody, I'm Bacon Ninja, and this is my budget build. If you don't know what this build is, it is a complete out-the-door freestyle FPV drone for $250 or less. But you have to build it yourself. And that's what we've been doing for the past few weeks. We've been taking all the steps necessary to build this drone ourselves. And so far, we put all of our electronics in, we built the frame, we put motors on it, we've got everything done. The video system's in, the control system's in, everything exists. But now it's time to take the last step. And the last step involves your computer, because actually flashing this thing and getting it all programmed is going to be a little bit quicker on the computer than any other way to do it. And yes, you can do a lot of this from your phone with the SpeedyBee app. I'm going to make a separate video about the SpeedyBee app and how to accomplish it, but today we're going to be using BetaFlight on our computer. You will need access to BetaFlight Configurator. You will need version 10.8.0, which is the newest as of this video. You'll also need internet access, because in order to flash the ESC in this build, we're going to use an online configurator. So you will need internet access, and you're going to need a CLI dump from my resource page, which is linked in the description below, so that we can program it, because it'll have a tune and all the configuration, everything we need. I've already got that done for you, and we're just going to copy it right over to this. But like every other step we've taken before now, you're going to need a few things. This time, those things don't involve hot soldering irons and burnt sausage fingers, but there are a few things that are necessary. So along with the drone that we've been building, you will also need a set of Ethics Raspberry props, because this is tuned for those props. You'll need a charged 6S LiPo. I recommend somewhere between a 1000 and a 1300. You'll need a good USB-A to USB-C cable, a good one, and I mean a good one, because lots of things can go bad if you don't have a good one of these cables. You'll go to plug it in and the drone will act like it doesn't exist. So make sure it's a good quality USB-C cable, and it's a good property of it if it dilly dangles like this, just for funsies. You will need an 8mm wrench for your prop nuts, 2 battery straps, and the prop nuts that we got with our iFlight motors, as well as your radio. We will be using the radio today. And once you have all that stuff together, it's time to get down to business. Now, we've already tested our quad with a smoke stopper and made sure nothing shorts out. It is very important during this step that you do not have props on your quad. Just because you have the props in your hand does not mean they should be on the quad. We're going to be plugging this into BetaFlight and running the motors on the bench quite a few times. So do not have props on your quad for this entire step until the very end, when I tell you you're done and you're ready to maiden it. Just leave them off the entire time. But the first thing we need to do in this build is get the VTX unlocked, because the channels are not available on the VTX for the entire raceband spectrum unless you unlock it. Now, disclaimer here, unlocking it requires a ham license in the United States and something else in the CE that I don't know what it is, because I don't live in Europe, but a lot of you do, so hopefully you know what that is. But if you do not have a license to operate on the extended bands, it is illegal. What you do with that information is up to you. We're going to unlock this VTX. So to unlock this VTX, we will be plugging in a pack to the quad, and what we're going to be using is this button right here on the TX800 VTX. There's also an LED indicator at the very back. It's kind of hard to see in here. I'll try to adjust the camera so you can see it. There's an LED at the very back. What we're trying to do here is open up the channels, and when the channels are locked out, there's a red flashing light in this VTX on the back. Whenever the channels are unlocked, it's a solid light, a solid red light on the VTX. And what we have to do is hold the button down on the side that I showed you for 10 seconds. So we're going to power the quad on. We're going to wait a second. We're going to press the button, and then we're going to hold it for 10 seconds until we see a solid red light on the back of the VTX. So again, with my props off for safety, I'm going to plug in the quad, and I'm going to let the VTX start up. Now, it's going to be really hard to see back there, but there is a red flashing light. I'm hoping that I can get it in one of the shots. There's a red flashing light. Now I'm going to hold the button down for 10 seconds. And it's going to go through some weird lights. And then the red light goes solid, and we are good to go. That means our VTX is now completely unlocked, and we can use channels like Raceband 8, which is kind of nice. Now, as far as power output, this thing only goes to 800 milliwatts, so unlocking it doesn't provide any additional power. It's going to go to 800 milliwatts because that's within the FCC limits, because 1 watt is the FCC limit. But now we have all the channels available to us. So, what's the next step, you might be asking? Well, it's time to get out our fancy-dancy USB cable and flash our flight controller, and then we're going to flash the ESC. So, get your quad plugged in with no pack plugged into it to BetaFlight, get it connected to BetaFlight, and I'll show you how to flash this firmware. So you can see that it sees our flight controller here in the top right, and we're going to hit the Update Firmware button. That's going to take us to this page where it says choose a board, all this fun stuff. We're going to hit Auto Detect. It found our SpeedyBee F405 V3. We're going to flash BetaFlight 423 because that is the newest as of right now. And I meant 432, not 423. But that's the newest as of right now, and that's what we're going to flash. It has some fixes for some different things on different flight controllers. Not a big deal. 431 is also great, but since that's the newest, that's what we're going to go with. And we want to make sure this no reboot sequence is off because we do want it to reboot into bootloader mode because it's in normal mode right now. We want to do a full chip erase because we're going to dump the entire configuration out of this thing. The next thing we want to do is load firmware online. That will download our firmware. You can read through these release notes if you want to, and then we're just going to hit flash firmware. It'll initialize, it'll erase, and it'll flash our flight controller. And now we just wait for the thing to flash. Now this actually doesn't take very long at all. It goes through pretty quick. Communication's pretty fast. And if you haven't ever done this before, what's happening right now is it's erasing the memory where the BetaFlight firmware is installed on the board. Not stalled. It's not stalled at a steep angle. It's installed on the board. It's erasing that, putting a new version of BetaFlight on, and getting rid of everything altogether on this flight controller. That means where all the UARTs are mapped to the CPU, all kinds of things are going away. So when we connect to this for the first time in a second, which we're going to do momentarily, there's going to be a pop-up that's very important that you cannot miss. And if you, for some reason, click the wrong thing, you need to just go reflash it because it's going to be all kinds of really messed up if you miss this first prompt. So it just got finished on mine. Let's go press that button. So you can see we got programming successful on here, and we show the BetaFlight flight controller again in the top right. We're just going to go ahead and hit connect. Now this is the important thing. It asks if we want to apply custom defaults. We absolutely do. Apply the custom defaults. All right, it'll reboot the flight controller. We get our flight controller back in the pull down, and we hit connect one more time. We're going to get this warning because there's no motor output selected and the accelerometer is just not working correctly. You can just hit close on that one. And so at this point, we could load my CLI dump and we could be off to the races, right? Well, no. We have to flash the ESC because we're going to be running BlueJay on this ESC instead of BLLES, which BLLES is an 8-bit instead of 32-bit watered down version of blah, 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 blah. Anyway, what BlueJay will do is give us some of the feature sets of a more expensive ESC in this budget ESC. And we want that feature set, mostly RPM filtering. Whether you know what that is or not, you want to be running it, and BlueJay will enable that for us on this cheaper ESC. Now, before we can flash the ESC, though, there is one setting change that we need to make in BetaFlight. We're not going to load the entire CLI dump right now. We're just going to make this one change, flash our ESC, and then come back to BetaFlight. So to make this change, you need to go into the Motors tab of BetaFlight. And in this Motors tab, you're going to pull down the protocol, and you're going to select DShot 300, and then you're going to save and reboot the flight controller. Once that reboots, unplug the USB from the flight controller, and let's get prepped to flash the ESC. Now, the ESC flashing, it's important that you do not have your props on the drone, just like everything else we're going to do today until the very, very end. And I do not have my USB plugged into it either. We also want to go ahead and close BetaFlight Configurator so that we don't confuse BetaFlight Configurator with the serial connection that it wants on the flight controller, because we're going to be connecting to the ESC. So it's best that we just close BetaFlight Configurator. We'll open it again when we come back. But for the ESC flashing, we're going to be using a web-based program called escconfigurator.net, I believe it is. I'll show it to you in a second. But for that, it's best to run it in Google Chrome, or you can even run it in the new Microsoft Edge. A Chrome-based browser is the best way to access this and get a serial connection, because we're making a serial connection to a web page, which is kind of weird, but it's going to work just fine. Anyway, get a Chrome browser up, because I prefer Chrome. You do you, and you can try it on something else if you want, but we're going to use Chrome. And then before we plug in our USB this time, we are going to plug our pack in. So get the Chrome web browser up, go to this web page, then plug your pack in, let the thing boot, and then we'll plug the USB in. And it's actually esc-configurator.com. That's the page we're going to go to. Now I'm going to plug my pack in, and then plug my USB in, and then meet you on this web page. And on this page, we're going to want to go to Open Port Selection, and we're going to go to this one, the BetaFlight STM32F405. Yours may not say COM5. That's perfectly fine. Hit Connect, and then press the green Connect button. Once we're in here, we're going to hit Read Settings. Your ESC may beep. It'll read all the settings. Now, mine's already flashed to BlueJay. That's perfectly fine. Take a look at my settings here. In case you're wondering, you can stop this video and just screenshot those or whatever you want to do. We are going to come back to those later because it is going to load new settings onto the ESCs. And yeah, you just want to make sure it looks like that when we're done. It shouldn't do anything weird, but we want to make sure it looks like that when we're done. Anyway, back to the flashing. We're going to hit Flash All ESCs. We're going to hit BlueJay. It's going to pick our version for us. The JH50 is what we want. We want to select the version. We're going to take 18.1. That's the newest. And for the PWM frequency, we're going to be running 24 for this. And you just hit the flash button and let it go to work. Now it'll make its way through each of your ESCs and flash them with the goodness of BlueJay, which, if you know about BlueJay birds, they're kind of a pain in the butt. But this ESC firmware is actually really good. I get attacked by BlueJays pretty often in my front yard. This is going to take a few minutes, and then we're just going to make sure everything turned out okay. We're going to double check some things, and then we're going to make our way back to BetaFlight. We really don't have too many steps left. You are nearly done, my friend. You've almost got a flying quad. But before you get too excited, a couple more things. Let's see if this finished. And it looks like they did. That's all the settings that I had selected. So you want to make sure yours looks like this too. And if it does, you are good to go. Let's go ahead and hit disconnect and then unplug the pack. You can hear the quad rebooting because it does reboot right now after you do that. So I'm going to unplug my pack. I'm going to unplug my USB cable, and then yeah, I'll be right back. Okay, I've got that. I've got my USB cable back. Sorry for the intrusion. I'm just going to wiggle this around a little bit more. No, actually what we're going to do is I'm going to give the quad a few minutes to cool off because we've had it running on the bench for a little while. And although this VTX isn't a super, super hot VTX and none of the boards are super, super hot boards, it is warmer than it could be. And so I'm just going to give it a few minutes to cool down in between this step and the next step. You should too. So go take a break and I don't know, fly a couple packs on another drone or play in the simulator for a minute. That's a really good idea. And then we'll come back to this momentarily. But for me, it's going to be right now because I can do that with editing. And while I'm letting mine cool off, we're actually going to need something out of this resource folder. You're going to need this budget build CLI diff right here. So you're going to want to right click that and just download this somewhere. It doesn't matter where, just remember where you download it. I'm going to dump mine in my downloads folder because that's going to be our configuration diff that we're about to dump onto the flight controller. So it's kind of important. Remember, it's still cooling off right now. We're not going to plug a pack in, but I am going to plug my USB back in and get it connected back up to BetaFlight so that we can flash this diff. I can't help but wiggle this. Plug your cables in, everybody, and don't do this. So connecting to BetaFlight, we still get this error with the accelerometer, and that's perfectly fine. Just close through that. Let's hop into the CLI tab, and let's do load from file down here in the bottom right. Now we're going to go to where we have our diff file. I'm going to hit that. I'm going to hit open. It's going to pop up this window. It's going to put all this stuff in for us. That's perfectly fine. Hit execute, and then it's going to run through all of it. And at the end, it's going to save, which will then reboot our flight controller. Now, we only have a couple things left. We want to make sure our motor directions are correct. We want to set the VTX channel for our goggles. Hopefully you know what channel you want to be on. I'm going to set it to R8, and I'm going to show you my preferred settings, but it's going to totally be up to you what you would like to do. We're going to do those two things, and then we're going to set our modes with our radio just to make sure those are all good. And we're going to talk about radio links here in a minute. But first, let's get connected. Let's do our motor directions together so you can see what that looks like and just double check that everything is good. Now remember, in the ESC, we set all of them to reversed. If you set all of them to reversed, then it may be okay, but we're going to double check. Always double check. And again, no props on the drone yet because you'd like to keep your fingers because fingers are good. They're what separates us from most mammals. You like these and you want to keep them. So don't put props on your drone yet. All right, let's get connected to BetaFlight again. And this time I am going to go ahead and plug a pack in, and we're going to go to the motors tab. And now that we're in the motors tab, you're going to see a bunch of things have changed. Bidirectional D-shot's on, this has filled itself out, and the direction of the props is set up here. You can see that we have the props in a what's called props out configuration. So this is showing you the direction that we want these motors to turn. So in order to check this, we're going to hit this motor direction button here. We're going to I understand, and we're going to hit individually. Now we see the motors come up here in this window. Motor 1 is the back right motor. We're going to hit this 1 here. And what we want to do is feel it with our fingers. You can feel it with your fingers gently, and it should be spinning in the direction shown in the picture. If it is, just don't do anything. Don't hit normal reverse, just leave it alone. Let's go to motor 2, which is this one up here. Press R2, and it's spinning in the right direction as well. Now, if it wasn't spinning in the right direction, we would hit reverse, and we would feel it spin in the other direction. All right, that's good now. All right, now 3, we want to feel it spin in the direction. If that's not working, we would hit reverse and reverse it. 4, we want to feel it spin in the right direction, and it is. If it's not working, we would hit reverse and reverse it, and then we hit close. And that's it. Your motors are all configurated. Now, before we unplug the pack, let's go to the VTX tab, set your channel, and just make sure smart audio is working. In this video transmitter tab, you can see I have mine set to race band 8, 800 milliwatts output power. I already have the VTX table loaded for you. How nice. And over here on the right side, we can see that we have a VTX type tramp. It's ready and it's setting everything. That means everything is unlocked and working. If for some reason that's not working, one of two things is happening. Either you didn't solder everything correctly for the VTX Smart Audio, or you have not unlocked your VTX and it can't set it to 800 milliwatts. Now you're using my config, so yours will also be set to race band and 800. Change it to what you want it to be, but if something is wrong in that right side, there's a good chance that you have failed to properly unlock the VTX. Go try that step again. Now let me show you where to set your band and channel, just in case you want to, and why I like low power disarm. So if you want to be on a different band, now is the time to do that. Just select the one you want. If you want to be on a different channel, now is the time to do that. Select what you want and just hit save. Now I have low power disarm on, which means that when the quad is disarmed, it will go to the lowest power state. In this case, 25 milliwatts. So when I disarm, it will go all the way down to 25 milliwatts. If you don't want to do that, if for some reason you want it to be full power all the time, even after you crash and disarm or before you take off, so it heats up while you're sitting there, just use low power disarm. It's a good thing to get in the habit of. But if you for some reason don't want it, go ahead and turn it off and hit save. So we have all of that done. Now it's time to get our modes done. So let's get our radios ready and let's get this connected. Now we still have the battery plugged in. If we do this fast enough, it will be just fine. But what we're going to do first is actually disconnect from BetaFlight, and we're going to unplug the USB and unplug the pack, start our radio up first, and then we're going to plug the USB in and then the pack. But let me get my radio, and then I actually want to talk to you about the RC links real quick. And this is my radio, the TX16S with my AG01 gimbals, and I'm running Express ELRS. And for this build, I picked a Happy Model EP1 receiver, which is Express ELRS. Now, I am not going to cover with you how to flash Express ELRS to the receiver and to your transmitter. I'm going to expect that if you own this transmitter, you've done this before with a bind and fly or a plug and play, and you already know how to do it. So now is the time to flash the firmware to your Express ELRS receiver before we plug this back into BetaFlight and do all of the modes. However you do it, now is the time to do it. Now, if you've used a different control link like Crossfire, same thing. Get your Crossfire completely done how you would normally do it with a plug and play or bind and fly. If you're using FrSky, throw it out the window because you're going to fail safe it anyway. Seriously. Think about something else. But if you're using FrSky, my wiring diagram wouldn't have even worked for you because you need other things and my configuration won't work for you. Now, if you're using Crossfire, I already have it set for Crossfire. If you're using Express ELRS, I already have it set for that as well. But let's get the modes done real quick on my radio, and hopefully you know how to use your control link. If you don't, go look up a video and get that part done now before you move on. That's what I'm trying to say. So I'm going to start up my radio before I start the quad, make sure it's all powered up, and then I'm going to start up the quad with my battery, and then plug the USB in, and let's look at the modes. So in BetaFlight, under the receiver tab, we should now see stick movements. There we go, we see stick movements. Now, if yours looks like mine, where it starts at 1,000 and ends at 2,000, see that on throttle there? Your stick low threshold should be 1020 to 1980, somewhere in that range. If for some reason yours is weird, then you've probably already experienced this before and you need to set the stick low and stick high to what you normally set it on with a bind and fly. If you don't know what that is, to be safe, you can set it on 1050 for the stick low and 1950 for the stick high, just to give you some wiggly room there in case yours isn't dead center. Now that we have that done, let's go to the modes tab and just validate all of our modes. So your mode list is going to look like this because mine does, and I have ARM on aux1 in the high position. You can see when I flip my aux1 switch, it goes up to 2,000 and I've got it in this range here. Now, if that isn't you, if that's not working on the switch you want to use for armed, you hit X to remove this, you hit add range, you hit auto, just leave that alone, and then flip the switch into the arm position. See how my switch is over here right now at 2,000? I'm just going to pull this bar over to 2,000 and make sure that the orange line is within the orange range. And then test it, and you can see over here on the left, and yes, Joshua Bardwell is screaming at you the whole time because I use his voice pack. You can too. I might make a video about that sometime. You can see on the left that it's going on and off from ARM. Same thing with all the other ones. I have my beeper, and you can hear my quad beeping when that goes, and you can remove that and make it whatever you want as well. Just make sure that you pull this down to auto whenever you add a range so that it finds the switch automatically and you don't have to hunt around for it. If you have that set to auto, the first switch you flip is the one it's going to pick. So just set that to auto, which it does by default if you hit X and then add range. Flip the right switch that you want it to be, and then make sure that your orange bar is within your orange line whenever it's in the position you want it to be to activate that thing. And there are really only 3 things I recommend you have: arm, beeper, and then flip over after crash. And that's it. Once you've set all those, we're good for the radio link. You can go ahead and turn your radio off. One more thing that we're going to do, though, is add a preset for your control link. I'm going to turn my radio off now because it's making a bunch of noise. There we go. It's off now. Anyway, one more thing we're going to do is set a preset for our control link to make sure all the smoothing is good. If you're already using Express LRS on this, I already have the preset loaded for Express LRS 250 Hertz. If you're using that, then you are good to go. If you're using anything else, let's go set a preset. So we're going to head to the presets tab and we're going to go ahead and unplug the battery from the quad because we don't need that VTX continuing to be heated up. Under categories, we're going to hit RC link, and then we're just going to find the RC link you're using. If you're using Express LRS 150 or 500 or whatever it may be, you're gonna go to that one. There's some for Ghost in here, Red Pine, Crossfire, Tracer, all the things. You're going to go to that. Now, inside of each of these, it's going to ask you some questions, and it's going to be specific for your link. The one I'm going to show you is Express LRS. The other ones all have their own questions. Just answer them to the best of your ability. And like I said, hopefully you've done this before with a bind and fly, because these are steps that you would take on a, well, plug and play. Bind and flies come with this, but on a plug and play drone where you've had to solder your own receiver, but that's it. These are steps you would need to take anyway, so hopefully you've done this, but just answer the questions to the best of your ability. They're going to be unique to their control link, but I'll show you the ones for Express LRS. And in this pull down, I'm going to pick freestyle for fine tuning because I don't need an excessive amount of smoothing. I'm going to do serial separate RX because we soldered it on. It was not built onto the board. I'm going to do single cell values, so I get the telemetry sending me cell values instead of the entire pack, and I'm not going to touch anything with cinematic rates down here. Then I'm going to hit pick, and then I'm going to hit save and reboot. It's going to flash that, and then our flight controller is going to reboot. And that's literally it. You've done it. You have done it. It's time to unplug your quad once you see it come back up in BetaFlight, and then you can stop dangling this cord around because you don't need it anymore. Now there's just a couple of physical steps we need to do, and then this thing is ready for a maiden flight. And the first of those physical steps is get your battery straps in. So let me show you how I designed this to hold the battery straps. And where these are going to go is one's going to go right here, and then one's going to go right here. And to do that, we take our battery strap, and we want the Velcro-y side down. And we're going to feed from the non-XT60 side over. And we're just going to hold this down with one finger and feed that gently across. Now you may have to kind of catch it with this hand and then pull it gently across. There we go. And then we're just going to strap that in place for this battery strap. You got one in there now. Now behind this set of standoffs, we're going to run the next one in the same direction. And we're just going to do the same thing and loosely strap that there. Now the last bit is going to be putting your props on. So get your Ethics Raspberry props out of their bag and it's time to go. Now if you don't want to use the Ethics Raspberry, yes, you can use different props. I have tuned this drone for props of this relative size. So the size of the Ethics Raspberry is 5.1 by 3.6 by 3. So they're 5.1 inch blades with 3.6 inch pitch by 3 blades per thing, because there's 3 on each one. If you get something in that relative size from another brand, it's going to run about the same. What I would recommend you don't do is go with something that's way more pitch. Like if this is 3.6, I wouldn't go above 3.8. I wouldn't put 3.25 inch props, because they're going to hit. I wouldn't go down to 4.8 inch props because that's not going to be enough thrust. I would stick around this zone, but you can mix and match with other vendors as long as they're close to this prop. The tune should be relatively close. And then over time, you'll figure out how to manipulate the tune for your props. But for now, use these or something very, very similar because that's what I have it set up for. So let's get these out and we'll throw them on the quad. Now we need to remember our picture about where the props go. Remember the props are spinning outward in the front and outward in the back. So that means the tip of our blades, hopefully you can see that in the camera, needs to be facing the right direction. If I put it on here like this, the tip's gonna go inward. That's not right. What I wanna do is have the tip go outward. So that means this goes over there. Same thing for this prop. It's the same one. So I know I don't wanna put it over here. That means I can put it diagonally across over here and it'll spin outward on the rear. Now I know the other two that I have are the only other options, so they're going to spin outward as well. And just a quick double check that the leading edge spins outward as desired in all places, and we're good to go. Now we're going to get our prop nuts, and we're just going to put them on with our driver, and you just get them on there relatively snug, not overly tight. What I like to do is just get them down there. Nylocks are hard at first, and give them a little bit of a crank. Make sure they don't move, and then repeat that across the board. And now it's time to pat yourself on the back because you have a completely built drone. You have built maybe your first drone or maybe your cheapest drone. Whatever it is, you built it, and now it's time to be proud of it because it should fly at this point. If you've done everything that we talked about all the way through and you've gotten all the results that we were looking for the entire time, this thing should fly. Now, what should you do with this first? Should you just throw a pack on and then go rip it as hard as you can possibly shred? No, you should not do that. What you should do is take this outside in a safe place that it won't get hurt if it flips over and it won't hurt anybody else if it flips over, with short grass, not tall grass that gets in the props. Sit it down on the ground. Get your radio out, put a pack on it, plug your pack in. Don't put your goggles on. Hover test this. If you're not a good enough pilot to hover without the goggles, just do your best. The idea is that you're going to arm it and you're going to throttle up gently, keep it in place, and make sure it hovers there. What you don't want to happen is this quad to freak out and flip over in any direction as soon as you pull the throttle up. If that happens, it means your props are probably on wrong, or you didn't do something right with the motor direction, or somehow you've installed the flight controller backwards. Check those things because that's the most common reason for a first arm throttle up flip out. Check those things, go back through them and see. Now, if it does take off and hover, what you want to listen for is any trilling vibrations. Like it should sound fairly smooth. You may hear a little bit of like a tin can pinging sound. That's just the bearings moving. But what you don't want to hear is like that kind of sound. I know that was weird, but you don't want to hear it trilling because that means the tune is too hot. Now, I did tune this very near sea level with these props. If you're way up high in the mountains somewhere, the tune may be off a little bit, but you shouldn't hear that noise. I tuned it in about as thick air as it's ever going to see, so it shouldn't be mad at you. It should be smooth, maybe not as powerful if you're up in the mountains, but it shouldn't be mad at you. So you shouldn't hear any trilling. And if you don't hear any trilling, then it's time to land, disarm, put your goggles on, set them to the channel that you set in the VTX. If it's race 8, put it on race 8. If it's whatever else you put it on that. And then take it for a smooth, calm first flight. If it checks out after that, then you send it as hard as it'll go, and then you post a picture and tag me on Instagram whenever you break the ever-living crap out of it because you put it through a wall, because I want to see it happen. I want to see you beat them to death, because that's what these are for. And you deserve to do that for having built it. Congratulations, you've made it through your first quad. If this has been helpful, give this video a like. If you've liked this whole series and you want to see more like it, subscribe to the channel, because I am apt to do more of these kinds of things. I have really enjoyed it, although it has taken me forever. If you're looking forward to a video where I do this with my phone, it's coming. It's just going to take a little bit longer because the steps in the recording required are more complicated for me than anticipated, given my phone doesn't have an HDMI output, which is a pain. But that's coming, so stay tuned for the channel for that. If you want to convert this to digital, that's coming too. That's going to happen probably in the next month or so. I'll show you how to convert this over to a Runcam link, because Caddx doesn't make air units or Vistas anymore, so we'll put a Runcam link and probably a Runcam Wasp in the front of it to convert it to digital if you want to convert from analog, because now's a good time to do that in the digital market. We're going to do that. Just stay tuned. But I hope that you've enjoyed it, and I hope you love your build as much as I have loved helping you with your build. If you have any questions about it or you're having problems, head over to my Discord. There is a link in the description below, and feel free to ask me in the troubleshooting section or just in the general section. Ask all the lovely pilots that hang out over there. We have a really good chat going on most of the time. So drop in on us and ask us questions if you have any. We'll be more than happy to help you out. There are quite a few people in there already who are working on or have finished their budget build, so you can get some opinions from them about what things you might need to do. Anyway, I hope this has been great. I have really enjoyed it. Thank you for allowing it to happen. Thank you to SpeedyBee for providing all of the electronics for these. Thank you to Pyrodrone for all ye other things that are on this quad. I couldn't have done it without those two places. Anyway, that's all I have. I'm going to catch you later, but until next time, stay greasy. That was backwards, if you didn't notice. Oh, the innocence of a new quad. You don't know it yet, but you're doomed. It's just a life of misery when you're in my house. It's not going to be okay.